Welcome to Cutting with the Chase with Rob Chase, brought to you by the InlandNorthwestReport.com. Alternative news and opinion for the Inland Northwest. And now, here's your host, Rob Chase.
Hi, this is Rob Chase with Cutting to the Chase, brought to you by the InlandNorthwestReport.com. And today our guest is Pastor Afshin Yaghtin, and he's will be an interesting guest because I only know one other pastor in the area who is a pastor with Iranian heritage, and that's, as many of you know, is Pastor Afshin Yaghtin, who's out in Green Acres. So I think it's interesting when someone comes to a place like Spokane that's doesn't have a lot of diversity, that we have a pastor from Iran here. So I'm kind of curious, Yaghtin, Afshin, rather is your first name.
That's perfect. Yeah.
How you came here, and kind of a short story on what you're doing here in Spokane, and
Sure.
kind of keep us up to date on things.
Sure. So one thing I don't always tell people because there's a backlash, but I'm actually came in from California, but I was born in Iran. So I migrated here with my family in the late 70s. There was the big revolution, in that time with the Shah,
Right.
and the Islamic Republic was really taking over the country at that point. So my parents got word of that, maybe a few years before, and for other reasons they left, and we migrated here when I was about 5.
Was your family Muslim or Christian?
They, I would say humanist or secular in many ways, or Muslim by culture. My dad perhaps more, but they were really a part of the Shah's kind of era, where it was, things were becoming very westernized, and before the Islamic Republic took over. So they were kind of fleeing from the Islam in many ways. And I was very young, I was 5 years old, so I don't connect to it in a lot of ways, but we came here when I was 5 years old to California, lived there for about 38 years before I moved up here to Spokane.
Probably a lot of people in Spokane have less of a problem with Iran than do with California.
With California, that's why I don't mention California. I'm okay with Iran.
But most of the people, I think, that have come from California are nice people. They're getting out of a bad situation, they and their families. I don't blame them for coming up here, so I welcome them.
Absolutely, and some of them are conservative, like myself, are leaving for that reason. So hopefully we'll get the California conservatives here more than the other side.
Yeah, well, I found that to be true. Actually, talking to most of them. Of course, most of the ones I meet are at church, and they are conservative. But then some will come up here, I think, and they're leaving a bad situation, but they're almost kind of like recreating it up here.
I'm concerned
It's probably
about
why
that.
there is some trepidation, because there is plenty of room for people, I think.
Yeah, I don't blame them, because we don't want to make it another California, right? So
What is it? Non-denominational, your church?
yeah, we're Baptist, but I consider it that non-denominational. It's just the Baptist side focuses on certain fundamentals of the faith and certain doctrines, and I preach from the King James Version of the Bible, so I identify as a Baptist in those areas. But we're really non-denom, in terms of we're not supposed to be denominationalist, according to the Bible. So
Well, I don't think the apostles were any particular denomination, so
yeah.
just kind of as things go on, you kind of pick up some baggage.
Exactly. I
right
say
along like that.
Baptistic more than anything.
Right. So, so your parents were sort of secular then, I guess.
Yeah, I would say so.
And are they still secular then? Or?
My mom is starting to, she's believing in Jesus, more recently, and I'm still working on my dad, so we'll
When
see.
did you have your Damascus Road experience?
It was quite some time ago now. It was back in 1993. I was 21 years old or so in college, and at that age when you're searching, for answers, and I thought Christianity was the last possibility, because I would have Christians come up to me, do you want to go to Bible study, and things like that, and on campus, and I just thought it was the silliest thing. I thought, God's not in this little Bible study, in this little church, but they ended up getting me in the end.
Yeah, I was like that. I think I was 36.
Yeah.
But At that time, I thought that Carlos Castaneda's had the closest grip on reality of what the spiritual world was actually like. But then I had ran into the right people, and I became born again at 36.
Good.
So it's been the biggest blessing to my life and my family too.
Absolutely.
That's the way to go. It's because I think we're all seeking truth. In fact, there was a writer, Malcolm Muggeridge. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he wrote for Punch magazine, and he was actually a communist at one point. And then but like C.S. Lewis, he was kind of seeking to prove it wrong, and then he wrote a book about Mother Teresa and was so impressed with Christianity. But he said, if you're seeking, then you've found them already. If you're doing that, because I was actually seeking myself, and eventually I found them. But what if someone dies before they found him? I think that act of seeking, of course we don't know till we get to the other side, but that might count for something. Because a lot of people, they have bad church experiences, I think, and but like they always say, I'll come to church. We always have room for one more hypocrite because we're all hypocrites. So it depends on us. We shouldn't really worry about that, but we should be. It's kind of an individual, up to us to try to make the church we go to the best one to bloom where we're planted.
Yeah, no church is perfect. I mean, we're all flawed and sinful in the flesh. Mm-hmm. So, but we're born again, like you said. That's a term I haven't heard much. More recently, people don't talk that way as much anymore. Yeah. But in the 90s, it was, if you're not born again, you can't enter the kingdom of heaven. Mm-hmm. That was so. I identify as a born again Christian.
Right. Well, that's what Jesus said. You must be born again. Which,
that's right.
Of course, Nicodemus couldn't understand. He was thinking physically, well, how is that possible? But in retrospect, I guess we can look back with the Holy Spirit. And those things are we discern them.
Absolutely.
And when I was first saved, I'd listen to a lot of things, and someone. In fact, that was when I first got the internet too, and I would be in chat rooms, and someone would say something really devastating. Well, I can't prove them wrong, but suddenly it seemed like a few weeks later or whatever, I'd hear an answer for it. I was listening to Christian radio.
Right.
So I think getting out there and not just being in your churches, but you're sort of an activist, pastor.
Yeah.
You've got to bloom where you're planted, so that doesn't mean like people will come to you. You kind of go out to them too, I think.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, the way my philosophy on that is that church is for the saved. So when you go to church, that's where you get the deeper, in-depth teaching from the Bible. Mm-hmm. Whereas a lot of churches today, they're preaching just the milk of the word. They're preaching the basics inside of church, when the church is meant to have the meat and the deeper doctrine for Christians, but then we're to go outside the four walls of the church. Mm-hmm. And that's where we bring the word and the gospel and the basics to the dying world, to the lost, Right. So yeah, I definitely like to be out there. Otherwise, it's just a dead, insular church. It's just helping us.
Well, that's kind of a part of the Great Commission, because Europe and America sent our missionaries out for so long, and now we need missionaries to come back from the mission field
right here.
And kind of start turning us back around too.
That's right.
Helping us get back to the basics, I think.
Absolutely, yeah. We'll go preaching at the parks, door to door even, which very few Christians do. Mm-hmm. But we'll actually go out and get the gospel out, or show up at these controversial events, like the going to Planned Parenthood, or the drag queen issue that that came up. Or we like to be there when it's something relevant that I can, in our church, can make an impact on.
Well, there's a lot of people that are afraid to speak out, that are afraid to go doorbelling or be in public. There's that fear, or shyness. But once you kind of get into it, just start putting one foot in front of the other. And it's okay, because you're not alone, you know that anyway.
If you have some guidance and some help with it, we have, verses that we're familiar with that we'll share, and, so yeah, but it can be, definitely it can be nerve-wracking for some. So.
And it's nothing, like getting martyred. That's not likely to happen here. I mean, you might get yelled at or told to scram,
That's about it usually, yeah.
Now, what if you were to go back to Iran? What kind of...
I don't think I'll go back, because honestly, the way that I'm very public about it, I think they would grab me, and that would be it. You wouldn't see me again.
Yeah.
So there's no question. And I felt a long time ago, before I really even got that much in the public light in any way, I just had a leading from God in the Spirit that, don't go. And it was funny because right after that, people kept inviting me from family, friends, and different people. It was almost like a setup, you know. So I've just determined, yeah, I mean, my life is here. I've been here since I've been 5 years old, and so our mission field is really right here in Spokane, more than anywhere else in parts of Idaho, you know, being neighbors. But
yeah,
so that's our mission field, you know, right here.
So you're kind of a, you know, you seem like a nice guy, but you're kind of a bad guy. You got put in jail. Tell us about
I was
that.
arrested for the first time in my life. And so that all had to do with the Drag Queen Story Hour that was being had at our public libraries, and right here in South Hill. And so, you know, we just heard about that a few weeks before it was scheduled, and everyone was, you know, very shocked because this is something you see in New York. This is something you see online a lot. Of course, that organization that's heading up the Drag Queen Story Hours they're a New York-based organization.
I think it happened simultaneously all across the country, didn't it?
I think so. I mean, they really did a hard push during Pride Month. So, you know, we'd heard about that, and, you know, like I said, I was talking to Casey Whalen, you know, earlier, and I just wanted to be there at the library and work out my vocation, you know. I'm a pastor, I'm a minister, so I wanted to be there in that capacity and see where I could minister to the innocent, to the children that's what was on my heart, was just, you know, it's one thing to have your views and to do them in the privacy of your own home or in a private square, private space, but when it comes out to the public library and to the public government funded, you know, entities like that, and then targeting 3 to 8 year old children, I felt compelled. I had to be there and see if I could do anything.
Well, I think they feel a burden to pull down any boundaries that there used to be. You know, I mean, you know, there was a reason those boundaries used to be there. I think so. 10 years ago, I don't think this could have happened. It's happening now. 50 years ago, there would have been bloodshed.
Yes.
You know,
it would have been unheard of.
Yeah.
Like I was telling the police, they would have been arresting these grown men dressed up as women reading to 3 to 8 year olds.
But you know, the strange thing is, that most of the people on the other side seemed fairly normal. They had brought their children for the story hour, and we were outnumbered probably 3 to 1.
Which was surprising, you know.
I wasn't really surprised because for some reason they sort of have this extra energy that we seem to have lost, I think.
True, we need to wake up the church.
You know, Christendom, yeah.
Yeah.
But they do have this, and the problem with that is if you tear down boundaries, then there's a vacuum. Well, what fills that vacuum? And I think it's government, you know, because in government, they say, oh, well, you can't have religion and government, you know, mixed together. Right. Well, then if you take religion out of it, that just leaves government. So government fills that need. It becomes God, like a false idol to them, because that's how you get your top-down direction is from government, not from God, not from the Bible. Definitely. And that's where you get your sustenance from, is, you know, being on the dole or subsidies or whatever. And then we kind of are, it's kind of like Caesar is one, you know.
I agree, yeah. And as you know, I mean, this is the basics, the fundamentals, but our rights come from God, and the Constitution is only protecting those rights. So when you remove God, all you have is statism, you have the state. You know, and you don't have rights, you don't really truly have rights then.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I'm sort of libertarian, but one of the things I liked was the phrase, I can't have my rights unless I'm willing to extend them to others, so that should be quid pro quo.
Right.
We're demonized, I think, when if anything, is, you know, what happened when they called Christ a demon. Well, he was a demon, you know. We're being demonized, I think, by the same spirit, the same modern day Pharisees that, you know, existed 2,000 years ago. But yet I was trying to write about it for Inland Northwest Report, and I just really couldn't quite articulate why. And it's kind of like the Supreme Court judge who was trying to rule on whether something was art or pornography. And he said, well, you know, I can't tell you why, I just know it when I see it. So that's all I can say is I know it when I see it. I know this is the wrong direction, you know, that we're going in. Yeah. Not just for adults, but especially the kids. So some people think, you know, another couple generations and it'll be totally secular.
Yeah, I mean, it is. And as you know, like the New American covered, it's the schools, it's education. You know, they're really taking over that space. I've got friends that are teachers in Texas, for example, and he showed me the books they're reading. He showed me the curriculum at the elementary level, and they were pushing outright same-sex pedophilia.
Yeah.
To 12, I mean, outright, you know. So that's the direction that we're going in. It's very frightening, you know, for the next generation or two. So we'll see.
Yeah. So I guess, how would you articulate that? Then what, I mean, why is it wrong? Not just because the Bible says it's wrong, but how would you explain to someone who's a non-believer why you were
I would say biology itself, science. I mean, you've got you know, male and female. We can reproduce. You've got XX and XY chromosomes. You know, science and the Bible actually agree. You know, when you have real science, it doesn't contradict the Bible. So it's just common sense that, you know, the best family will be a mom and a dad. I mean, when you were a kid, if one of your parents, you know, weren't there, it would be traumatic. So just having that mom-dad, you know, family relationship, biologically it makes sense, spiritually it makes sense.
Well, there's another organization in town, Spokane Fatherhood Institute. Ron Howenstein, I think, runs that, but he was telling me that 90% of the guys in jail didn't have a father figure. You know?
Yeah.
So it's so important. You know, one of our biggest problems is renegade fathers. They don't. There's a commitment. You know, you take it on for life. You just can't break up after the first fight.
That's
and
right.
leave your kids to fend for themselves. There's got to be that nourishment. You know, fathers have certain roles and mothers have certain roles. In fact, even, you know, up until 100 years ago, you had the extended family is always around. I mean, grandparents had a certain role. There's things you could talk to an uncle or a cousin about that you couldn't really talk to your father about.
Yeah,
we're
definitely missing that in today's culture, in the modern culture. I think that's a very good, important aspect of a family, is the extended family as well. Yeah.
Now, as a pastor, is there what's your bailiwick? Is there something you like to focus on?
Yeah, there's a couple things. I mean, first and foremost, it's always the gospel, you know, and making sure our doctrines are accurate and correct around the gospel. Because even the gospel itself, there's work seeping in. There's all kinds of false teaching seeping in. There's attacks against the Trinity, with oneness and modalism is like the Trinitarian view. People don't talk about hell anymore, hellfire, the eternal punishment of the non-believer. So these are what what are called the fundamentals of the faith. So when it comes to doctrine in church, I really focus in on understanding those fundamentals as your core teaching. And then from there, we can extend out to doing good works in the neighborhood and being active. Because it's really difficult to find a church that is right on the fundamentals, is biblical, but isn't also insular, like we talked about, where it's hard to get a church involved and active and going to Planned Parenthood and fighting those fights socially. So
well, yeah, because if no one says, "Hey, this is wrong," well, then it must be right if no one thinks it's wrong.
Yeah, we need to call out sin where it exists in our culture. And that's really difficult for our culture today, because everything's about tolerance and acceptance, and everything is okay and everything's relative. It's a postmodern, understanding of morality. But we need to stand firm on those things without being harsh. And I'm not saying go out and condemn and be judgmental and condemn, but we need to speak the truth.
It's hard to find that balance, I think.
It's a very fine line. And it's important. Yeah, we have to do it all with charity and love, but we need to be truthful and not be afraid.
Is there anyone who influenced you? C.S. Lewis influenced me, I think, in my search, and even Tolkien. In some ways, I liked fantasy and science fiction and all that. So, metaphorically, you could say, in the Narnia series, you had this Christ-like lion, and then in Tolkien you had the battle between good and evil, but in Harry Potter it's kind of good and evil, but there's no mention of God.
No,
there's these good witches
that
and
one's
bad
a little
witches.
iffy. Yeah,
or the Polar Express that it's about Christmas and this train they took up there, but there's not a single word about Jesus Christ.
That's right.
Not
Not like the old Charlie Brown or something.
Yeah,
right?
And that's how things have changed since the '60s. And having lived through that, it was I just turned 66 a few days ago.
Okay.
We were a totally different country in 1970 than we were in 1960, and not necessarily for the better. I think there's some things we had to go look and maybe find out for ourselves, but we've gone down those roads now, and I think we went too fast, and we shouldn't have gone down many of those roads at all.
Yeah,
so
I agree.
think maybe I would consider myself a conservative Christian, but a conservative is cautious. I think the ancient values still work, and they have worked for a long time for a reason, because they are true. So
they're tested and tried and true. Absolutely, I agree.
Okay. Well, if people would want to come to your church, how would you get them there?
Yeah, so you can get our contact info at newcovenantbaptist.org.
Okay.
So that's the best place to start. We meet on Sundays, 11 a.m.
Well, nice. You can sleep in a little bit.
Yeah. We'll meet a little bit before, have some coffee and fellowship, and then start church. But yeah, my phone number is on there. You can reach out to me, and people definitely, people are welcome, and I encourage you to come. For sure.
Well, I will sometime.
Yeah, that'll be great.
Yeah, you sold me. Okay.
Good.
Well, thanks very much, Afshin.
Absolutely.
And,
thanks for having me here.
We'll see you again.
All right.
Take
God
care.
bless you.
This has been Cut to the Chase, and don't forget to pray first.
This has been Cutting to the Chase with Rob Chase, where we cover anything under the sun that would be of interest to you, our viewers. Cutting to the Chase has been brought to you by the Inland Northwest Report.com, alternative news and opinion for the Inland Northwest. Don't forget to catch our Sunday edition of Cutting to the Chase, where Rob will interview local pastors on Christian perspectives. Until next time, stay in prayer for God, family, and country.